Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. We're going to continue World's Worst Children today. So on Monday you read Dribbling Drew with Mrs. Dingle, and yesterday you read Bertha the Blubberer with Mrs. Redwood. Today we're going to be reading Nigel Knit-Boy, page 58. And it's making me feel a bit itchy already. So Nigel Knit-Boy. Knits are itchy. Knits are scratchy. Knits are scritchy. Knits are a nuisance. Not for Nigel. Nigel was a boy who could never have enough knits. He wanted his hair crawling with them. Our tale begins on the morning that Nigel woke up to discover he had a knit living in his hair. Most of us would be appalled and immediately try to evict the knit. Not Nigel. He was delighted. The boy called this knit Mr. Henderson. Nigel didn't have a dog, or a cat, or a hamster, so he treated his knit like a pet. He made sure he never combed his hair. Knits hate combs. Soon, Nigel's hair was wild and frizzy like a great big bush, a jungle paradise for knits. Nigel fed Mr. Henderson tidbits of dandruff. Knits love dandruff, in the hope of training him up to do tricks, like leaping from one side of Nigel's head to the other. Soon afterwards, Nigel heard of another child at school who had knits. Her name was Tina Ting. Nigel wanted Tina's knits more than anything in the world. He wanted knits, knits, and more knits. At break time, Nigel chased the poor girl round the playground. Here you go, just show you the picture of what he looked like before and then after. He's definitely got some crazy hair going on there. What do you want? Cried Tina tearfully. I am not playing it. I want your knits, replied the boy. My knits? You're nuts, yelled the girl. Yes, I am nuts for knits, said Nigel. The boy tripped over a skateboard and flew through the air towards her. Clonk! Their heads bashed, and, in an instant, Tina's knits crawled over to Nigel's head. A little dazed, the boy was none the less happy. Now Mr. Henderson had some company. The next day, Nigel heard of a boy in school who had knits, Colin Clont. Nigel wanted those knits so badly, so he chased Colin down the corridor and cornered him in the toilets. The trembling boy locked himself in a cubicle, but Nigel would not give up. He climbed over the top of the next cubicle and dangled upside down from the ceiling. Nigel's and Colin's heads knocked together. Once again, the knits sprang across Nigel's head. Even the school cat was not safe from Nigel's advances. When Nigel was told that Minky the cat also had knits, he pursued the poor creature across the football field. Once he had caught the cat, he sellotaped it to his head. It looked like a very unconvincing wig. Still, one by one, the cat's knits bounded onto Nigel's head. Soon Nigel had so many knits that even his knits had knits. He stopped counting them at 1,000,003. There we go. There he is with the cat on his head, looking ridiculous. Now, you may be wondering why Nigel wanted a head full of knits. Please let me explain. Ever since he was a toddler, Nigel had spent his days reading comics. The boy was short for his age, if you don't count the wild bush of hair on top of his head, and he wanted to be strong and powerful like the characters in his comics. However, Nigel had a very normal upbringing. He'd not been lucky enough to have been bitten by a radioactive spider, or come from a Viking planet, or fallen down a well of bats. Besides, he found superheroes a bit boring. They were always doing good. The supervillains were so much more thrilling. Before long, naughty Nigel had a plan. One morning, as the boy was standing in the bathroom cleaning his teeth, he looked at himself in the mirror. His hair was not now so much of a bush, more of a hedgerow. Nigel could not remember the last time he had either cut or combed it. Buzzing in and out of this hedgerow of hair were billions of nits, forming a dark cloud around him. The day has finally come. My knit-based superpower is ready. From this day on, the world will know me only as NIT-BOY. Best of all, the name hadn't already been taken. So now that Nigel had all his knits, he went about getting a costume made. Fortunately, the boy's Auntie Pat was good at sewing and put together a supervillain costume for her nephew in no time. There we go, that's him before. I'm hoping on the next page we're going to see him in his supervillain outfit. Aha! There we go. Looking good. Nigel wore a cape fashioned from one of his mum's skirts. The NB logo for NIT-BOY, sewn by Auntie Pat. His nana's tights. His dad's old Y-fronts. Wellington boots. Nigel had his superpower. He had his name. His costume was on. He was NIT-BOY. At once he began his super villainy. The next morning he strode into school, his cape flapping in the wind. First, Nigel vowed to get revenge on his geography teacher, Mr. Drummond. Nigel found geography boring and spent most of his lessons reading comic books. Mr. Drummond had given the boy detention after detention. Now NIT-BOY stood at the door of the classroom. Initially, there were hoots of laughter from the other children. What with his costume and shrubland of hair, the would-be supervillain did look quite a sight. However, the laughter turned to silent awe as NIT-BOY called out his first command. Knits, swarm. The billions of knits that were whirling round his head formed a black mass next to him. Nigel, what on earth do you think you are doing? Demanded Mr. Drummond. Knits, attack, shouted the boy. They swarmed the geography teacher, nipping him all over with their tiny knit claws. Ah! Screamed Mr. Drummond as he raced out of the classroom. All his pupils pressed their faces up against the windows to watch their teacher. The man was trying desperately to fend off the knits. He was hopping and spinning and slapping himself as he sped across the playground field towards the school pond. Mr. Drummond then leaped in with a giant splosh. He finally had some relief from the knit-nips, though now he was submerged in green water with a fat frog sitting on his head. NIT-BOY smiled to himself. This was going to be fun. There we go. There's the picture. Who's he going to go see next then? So next, he marched across the playground to the dining hall. The dinner lady, Mrs. Droop, was something of a dragon. Boiled broccoli was her signature dish. Whatever you choose, even jam, roly-poly and custard, Mrs. Droop would sponge heaps of her green, watery mush on top. Then she would stalk up and down the dining tables, twirling her ladle like a baton, threatening to rap the knuckles of anyone who didn't eat up every last mouthful. Nigel hated broccoli. If Superman feared kryptonite, NIT-BOY was terrified of broccoli. Now he was to have his revenge on the woman who had made him eat a mountain of it. Nigel, she purred as she strode in, why have you got your pants on over your trousers? Mrs. Droop's smile was wiped off her face as soon as NIT-BOY shouted out his next command. Knits, to the broccoli. I am not having your blasted head lice messing with my delicious broccoli, protested the dinner lady. Too late. The knits had swarmed into a whirling tornado. Mrs. Droop stood open-mouthed in shock as this twisting vortex spun over to her precious trays of broccoli. Then the tornado started firing the damp, limp vegetable straight at Mrs. Droop. Splat, splat, splat. Soggy floret after soggy floret splattered across the woman's face, until Mrs. Droop was a damp, green, vegetable-y mess. There we go. Broccoli is everywhere. Now, Knit-Boy was ready to have his revenge on his headmaster. The elderly Mr. Sourchops had suspended Nigel from school after his 10th detention for reading comic books in lessons. The headmaster was a small and timid man, so Knit-Boy thought he would frighten him. Nigel stood in the playground just below the window of the headmaster's office. He closed his eyes in concentration. "Knits, shape-shift," he ordered. Slowly, the tiny insects swarmed together into the shape of a giant super knit. They were able to read their master's mind. As the boy kept his eyes tightly shut, a look of intense concentration on his face, the giant knit shape surged upwards to the headmaster's window. It banged on the glass with its huge claw. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Mr. Sourchops swiveled round in his chair and shrieked, "No!" The giant knit bashed its great head against the window, breaking the glass. Crack! "Help!" screamed the headmaster as he dashed out of his office. Running into the playground, Mr. Sourchops spotted a wheelie bin. Checking behind himself all the time for the giant super knit, the little old man pushed the bin as hard as he could before leaping into it as it was speeding away. Finally, Knit-Boy opened his eyes and watched in glee as the headmaster trundled across the playground in the bin. It bashed into a low wall. Clang! Sending the little old man flying through the air straight into the tree trunk. Clunk! The knits swarmed back to their master's head as Nigel strode out of the school gates. There was plenty more super villainy to be done. There we go. There he is in the wheelie bin, crashing into the tree. Let's have a look. See who's going to go to next. Is it going to be another teacher, I wonder? Let's see. Not long after, Knit-Boy arrived in the market square, which was teeming with bargain hunters. Using his knits, Nigel spelled out the letters of a very rude word in the sky. Ooh. Have a look at that one. I think it might be backwards to you, but it says bottoms. One old lady was so shocked she fainted at the sight. Next, Knit-Boy turned his attention to the local toy shop. The super villain ordered his knits to steal every single item in the store, including the till. The shop owner chased the boy down the street, but he was whacked over the head by the knits with one of his own giant teddy bears. Yet there was still more chaos and destruction to come. Suddenly, lights flashed and a siren wailed. The police had been sent to stop Nigel from creating further mayhem, but Knit-Boy ordered his knits to attack the police car, and they swarmed onto its windscreen. The glass became so thick with knits that the policeman crashed straight into the window of the optician's. Smash! Nothing could stop Knit-Boy now. He felt invincible. Soon the whole world would kneel before him. All hail Knit-Boy. There we go. Look at the mayhem he's created. Later that night, Nigel had put on his pyjamas and was lying in bed. Even supervillains need their sleep. The boy was dreaming up the next day's evil schemes. However, outside in the street stood a throng of townsfolk, armed not with flaming torches and pitchforks, as it is the tradition with angry mobs, but with an array of combs. Knit-Boy had to be robbed of his powers, and there was only one way to do that. They began to chant, "Comb his hair, comb his hair." The chant became louder and louder as the mob grew angrier and angrier. Nigel leaped from his bed and peeked out of his window. Looking down, he saw more and more people rushing out of their houses to join the horde. In a swirling whirl of knits, Nigel changed out of his pyjamas to become a Knit-Boy. He marched outside and approached the mob with his Wellington boots on and his cape, which was really one of his mum's old skirts, flapping in the wind. Knit-Boy felt ready to take on the world. His millions of knits had now multiplied into billions, or maybe even trillions. They buzzed round the boy's head, blacking out the scattering of stars in the night sky. It would be hard to give you an exact number of how many knits he had. "There he is," shouted someone. "It's Knit-Boy. Get him." The mob surged forwards, brandishing their combs. The old lady who had fainted in the market square was holding a large bottle of anti-knit shampoo called Knit Blitz. On the label it read, "The spawn enemy of the knit. This highly toxic and foul-smelling shampoo is poisonous to all known knits. It is guaranteed to kill knits until they are totally and utterly, completely dead." Unable to contain her anger a moment longer, the lady hurled the bottle at Nigel. It bounced off his hair and hit her on the head, knocking her out cold. The boy still stood his ground. Once again he commanded his knits. "Knits, lift." The knits swooped downwards to create a hoverboard under the master's feet. Then they lifted him off the ground with laughable ease. The crowd gasped in shock. This supervillain could actually fly. The boy zoomed through the night sky, performing an impressive loop-the-loop before hovering over the mob. "Now, go back to your homes or you will feel the full force of Knit-Boy." The townsfolk began muttering to each other dejectedly. They knew they were beaten, yet no one moved. "Disperse," Knit-Boy ordered the crowd. But his knits must have thought he was talking to them. Knits are not known for their intelligence. As far as I know, no knit has performed brain surgery or been involved in rocket science. So the knits dispersed. Led by Mr. Henderson, they all buzzed off in different directions, disappearing into the sky. Knit-Boy looked down at the people below. He gulped as he began to plummet downwards. He tumbled through the air, desperately flapping his arms. "Help!" There you go, bring that one a bit closer. The crowd surged out of the way, and Nigel landed headfirst on the pavement. Fortunately, such was the volume of hair on his head that he survived the fall without injury. "Grab him!" shouted someone. Nigel was carted off to the local hairdresser's, where his hair was washed with Knit Blitz shampoo, and he was given a very sensible short back and sides. Sorry, I'm getting my words all mixed up today. All remaining knits or knit eggs were combed out of Nigel's hair, and he had to make a promise in front of the whole town. "I solemnly swear never ever to become Knit-Boy again." You might be surprised to learn that, even though he was one of the world's worst children, Nigel kept his promise. Knit-Boy was never seen again. However, some time later, Nigel came up with another supervillain to be. From now on, he would be known as... Have a little guess. What do you think his new name's going to be? Oh no, Veruca Boy. A supervillain who refused to wear a plastic sock at the swimming pool, thereby unleashing a plague of verrucas on the world. And the best part was that Nigel could reuse the cape that was really his mum's old skirt. There we go. I think he's just going to keep going through supervillains, isn't he? Thank you so much for listening to that one today. That was a good story, actually. I quite enjoyed that one. Still feeling itchy from all the knits, but hey. If you want to, it's your choice. You can either just listen to the story and enjoy the story. That's fine with us. You could create a book review. if you want to tell us what you thought of the book, maybe draw how many stars, tell us what you liked about the story, who your favourite character was, and we will look forward to reading them. Until tomorrow though, have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed NIT-BOY. Bye guys.